All right, we'll start off in like a minute. So those of you who are trickling in, I've posted the Menti link again because most likely you won't be able to see the chat before you logged in. So if you could hop onto this Menti link, let's go through some quick exercises and then we can get started. So another minute. This is also like a heads up for Mr. Karthik for the YouTube streaming.
Yes, I have started.
Thank you. All right, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, for the last module in this series. It's good to see again some familiar names and some new ones. So my request is, as usual, please do turn your videos on. Let's keep this interactive so that I can see you, you can see me, and I'm just not talking to a screen over here. I posted the Menti link on both the Zoom chat and on Discord. So yeah, let's start off with some simple exercises like we have in the past. So go ahead and describe what the reading was for today. So for those who aren't aware, each module had like a corresponding reading, which has been mentioned on the webpage as well. So it won't take like a lot of effort for you to find it, but this is again to serve as like a quick reminder as to what the reading was about, so that you just consciously are aware that there is this thing. Even if you haven't read it, that's okay. You can just say I haven't read it or something. But yeah, just using this as an exercise to prime us up. It's getting annoyingly bright here, so just give me 1 second. Well, beginning the journey wasn't quite the reading. The reading for module, probably that was the name of the module itself, but not quite the reading that was associated with the module. So you got to go look up the webpage, I suppose, for you to get a sense for what the reading was. All right, so I'll move on. There's no point like hovering around this. From webpage, we should open unable to find. Okay, let me just post this for the sake of completeness. Let's find it. Wait, who's complaining that you're not able to find it? This is right on the landing page. And if you go to the module section, so let me just. Oh, I see a couple of things have gone wrong on the web page because of some recent changes, but nevertheless, I mean, it's still there. Let me, yeah, I just posted this on chat. And the reading for today was CS PhD application FAQs. This was the reading for today. But yeah, do spend time. It's in your interest to actually go through this material. It gives you like a very concrete sense of like what like PhD applications look like. And the reason why I'm covering this PhD application, why this is the reading for today, is because we've already been through the first 4 modules involved, like just trying to understand what research is and like getting some experience in it. And the final module that we'll discuss today is more from the perspective that, yeah, you having tried out something, you having tried out like a couple of projects, having realized that, yeah, you do probably enjoy research, and now you want to try it out in a more formal setting, a more professional setting, which is one way is like a PhD, another way is like through a research job or whatever. It's a more like a slightly more long-term commitment to it, like a year, 2 years, 3 years kind of stuff. So that's why the reading for today is just like trying to understand the PhD application process, written from the perspective of a professor who's like a veteran and like who's been in this game for like as long as all of us can remember, and yeah, those are his perspectives, and we'll discuss a little more about it as well. All right. So those of you who were present yesterday, if you weren't, you could just say I wasn't here. But try to like summarize in like one sentence what your key understanding or key takeaway was from yesterday's module. It could be anything. I mean, it could be whatever you took away. So it is good to get a sense of what everyone's takeaway or like messages were, so that you all at least get a shared sense of appreciation for what are the kinds of things that are being absorbed by your own peers. So yeah, just be brief. You could just quickly recap like what you thought was like the key message that you probably wanted to take away from yesterday's session. And if you weren't around, you could just say I wasn't around. So it's as simple as that. No one, no takeaways from yesterday. That's hmm. Okay. That was one of the takeaways. Yeah, the first interaction with like a prof should be short to the point and focused. Okay, fair enough. Learn to take initiative. Okay. I'll be curious to hear like how. Yeah, prototyping, improving, fine tuning, what to research on. I think yeah, I would probably relate more strongly to that. I do agree that we did discuss emails and we did. This was also one of the messages that we picked up. But again, all that interaction with the professor over email, all that is happening in the context of you having figured something out and you having worked on something concrete, and now you wanting to share your insight or like start a technical discussion with a faculty or like a professor, and as a consequence you want to reach out to them and like chat about it. So that was the context, but the more important like probably the step which precedes this is yeah, this concept of like it's not enough if we just sit and like think about ideas or think about these little modifications or extensions or like whatever. What really matters is like hard, like actual concrete work. And the way you start off is probably by yeah picking something up, and that could be random, that could be something you picked up from your courses, picking something up, working on it, building something, prototyping it, and in that process of prototyping you pick up like considerable like expertise, or like not even considerable, like it could be modest, but you pick up like concretely and tangibly, you pick up expertise, you pick up domain knowledge, you raise some questions for yourself saying what if this worked like this, what if that worked like that, and then you let your curiosity flow through and to express these all these different questions, and then you try to find out who it is who works on these kinds of problems, and use that as a loop to constantly refine what it is that you're spending time on and what it is you're working on. And the message again, the key message over there was don't like spend all your time just like trying to find out who's working on what and just trying to read up stuff and trying to like learn more topics or learn new topics through courses. All that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because it is important, but it is important only if it is followed up with like actual work. So actual work being you writing a little proof about it, theorem about it, like you extending it, you writing a system, implementing some code. All these things are like ways to tangibly translate your notion of some idea into something concrete. So for the first couple of iterations, you may just be following, just maybe replicating stuff that already exists out there. That is important. That is crucial, in fact, for you to learn your basic set of skills. And then once you start developing some fluency in like being able to like rapidly implement stuff that is already out there, you can then try out like minor tweaks like around the stuff that you're implementing, and that's how you will most likely stumble upon newer questions, try to explore something more, and then keep going around, keep going through your journey. One more, yeah, confidence is like key, and perfection comes well for writing the abstract slowly. Okay, I assume you meant like it's good to be slow and deliberate when you write stuff, and then you probably will get your point across much more sharply than like making like doing a hurried job about it. Okay, fair enough. So I would probably, yeah, relate to prototyping, improving, fine-tuning what to work on is one of the key messages that we wanted to share in the previous module. Okay, now because we're going to be talking about PhDs today, or like formally a little more about like the PhD process and journey. Right until now, we were discussing more about like the big picture in terms of like what is research, what to work on, how do you find what to work on, and let's say now you're in this process of like trying to understand if you do decide to do research or like pursue research some slightly more formally, and you want to do it via a PhD and not like a research job, where would you rather do it? And if you're choosing other, do feel free to share in the chat as to what you had in mind, as to like how you're thinking about it. Uh, it could be whatever. I mean, whatever reason that you're picking other. Just let us all know in the chat as to what you're thinking about. Uh, so that yeah, that also adds to the discussion, and we can like peel through this a little more than what appears on the surface. A couple of folks suggesting other. In fact, there's many more other than just 2, 3 other examples. And I'm interested to hear what this other is. So be brief and just you could just mention what you're thinking about in the chat. Okay, I do see 4 other responses, but nothing in the chat. So there's only so much I can play with. Oh, okay, so you're thinking, okay, MIT is one of the, okay. Anyone else wants to chip in as to what they're thinking about when they say other? Anyone has any thoughts they want to share? I mean, feel free to unmute yourself if writing it out is painful. When I heard research, I saw myself working with a person or a theorem, but no picture of an institute conjures up. Okay. Okay. Any public university that has interdisciplinary options in CS. Okay. Cool. Anyone else? So, okay, let's again, we need to really just go back and make sure that we've appreciated all that we have seen in the course so far, in the module so far, and just like quickly recap like what that whole prototype loop was. And the prototyping loop was you do your work, you produce something, you gain an interest, an entry point into some domain, and you keep working in that, and you find who the relevant people are who are working on stuff, and then hopefully you tune that, it gets tuned, and the set of people that you're interested in and who relate to the kind of work that you have already demonstrated some interest in becomes smaller and smaller in that process, and finally you're left with like 5, 10 people who, in this world that you're aware of after doing like a sincere like deliberate search as to who may most likely be more interested in working with you given the kind of things that you explored and wanted to explore. So when it comes down to that smaller set, and you know that there is like a uh, uh, probably like an interest match with this small set, would you then consider like which university they are from? Sure, there may be some local preference within that set, but if I ask you some blanket statement like this, saying, would you want to do your PhD at PhD? I mean, like at Stanford or like at Cambridge or like MIT or AIT, BIT, CIT, whatever. why would you say yes to any of that? Because I haven't given you any more information, or like you should be asking me more information, saying, sure, I mean, I would prefer doing stuff in, like, let's say, Cambridge over Stanford, but only if there is someone over there who wants to do the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. That should be the caveat, right? All these schools may be good schools, they may have good engineering programs, they may have good computer science programs. But if you don't have a person, because not every school will have like a person in probably every subfield of computer science. So if there are no people over there, why would you want to go over there and spend time over there? Is prestige so important that you would want to like use the name of the school over like some fit with some person whom you may actually enjoy working with? And that's a hard question to like first ask, be aware of, be cognizant of, and then actually use that information to sort of make a decision. And not everyone is very comfortable with it, and they make this rookie mistake of like just blindly getting into one school because whatever, the school is super popular, famous, etc. If you kind of know what you really are interested in and have some portfolio of work which demonstrates that interest, then why don't you optimize like whom to work with rather than like which school they belong to? Sure. I mean, I do agree that school, the environment and the school has like some advantage, because let's say a Stanford or like one of these schools may automatically, given how big their departments are, may likely have like more people working in like some area. But that doesn't mean like any other school is not good. It's the people who make up a school, who it's the people who make up a department. And if there's like a world-class researcher at like a XIT in India, just consider working with them. So we'll drive this point again. We'll beat around the same point a little more in today's module, but this was just to get you warmed up to this notion of like how you would probably even think about this. So here's like another related question which already links to what I already described. So if you decide to do research for a PhD, whom would you rather do your PhD with? So this is also like a common thing that keeps coming up, assuming you have come to the stage where you know that you want to try out like a research um, stint through a PhD. How would you consider these two options? Like three options. There are three options. One is the most accomplished professor from the best school in my area of interest. And best could be whatever definition of best. You don't care. I mean, some, but you know this person is very accomplished. They're actively pursuing research. They're publishing stuff. They're pretty much the best in the world. Very big name. So think of, if it's the pure sciences, think of like a Nobel laureate or someone uh, who has like a huge group, very popular, etc. Versus you'll say, ah, no, it doesn't matter as long as there is a good fit, which is what we discussed in the previous discussion. As long as there's a good fit with what I want to work on and the interest that I've kind of slowly started discovering, it's fine. I mean, that's fine. So how would you think about it? So I see, and if there's like, if you're thinking, if you use some other way to think about this, just say other and type it out so that we can all know how you're thinking about this. Okay, there is one other, and most of them say, yeah, it doesn't matter as long as there's like a good fit with what we want to work on. So the person who did decide or who did select other, if you could tell us more, and that'll be useful for like a discussion on like how to probably even consider these topics. Okay, I don't see the other person speaking up, so I can only imagine probably what they had in mind, but I really don't know. The okay, other, because I would never be someone more secluded because that matches my personality type. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting point, and that's something to consider as well. I mean, that pretty much relates to the point I would want to drive home as well through this question. So there are some pros and cons to all of them, and there is no right answer. Uh, there are benefits of working with the most accomplished person, like they really know their field, they have like an agenda, they're pursuing the research actively, etc., and they're well connected to the entire like ecosystem and whatnot. But they'll invariably be busy. So a person who's that popular will have like 20 students and like whatever, and they have their own agenda. And this is true with not only like PIs or principal investigators in like the university setting, but also in like research groups in corporate sort of research labs, where if you have like a very large group, you will rather be, your contribution would be, you could be an individual contributor where you're contributing your own thing. But if you're beginning your journey and you seek mentorship, if you know exactly what you want to do, perfect. I mean, there's like many people that I know get into grad school knowing that, okay, this is like the broad area that I know I want to work in. And these are the 4 or 5 problems that I know I want to work in. And a little bit of mentorship is great. I mean, even if they're not like uh, like the most active expert in that area, it's fine. I'll figure it out. So if you have that confidence and that confidence is already backed by some work that you've already done in this area, perfect, nothing like it. Then you might as well like, okay, then you can go work with the best professor or you don't work, it doesn't matter. But most of us will not fall into this bucket. Most of us will fall into this bucket of saying, okay, I worked on something, I would rather benefit from some active mentorship, and that active mentorship requires time, requires effort. They probably have like 100 things going on in their agenda, and they may have like a large group, 20, 30 students that they're mentoring, and then you don't get as much time and attention as you may probably require to actually make good progress. Many people find this to be a culture shock. Many people are not used to this concept. And many people still expect some handholding even after they get into grad school, saying, "Oh no, no one is telling me what problem to solve. No one is holding my hand and like telling me, okay, you're right and this is right and that is wrong." That's the attitude which you need to like snap out of. And the sooner you exercise that through your research internships and research stints at your undergrad level or whatever, at the time you're beginning your journey, the better it is, the more you train yourself to be independent and think independently, which is essentially the aim of like being a researcher, that you can't really rely on someone telling you, okay, do X and do Y and do Z. So it is in your interest to at least be aware that this is a reality and kind of train yourself towards it. That said, if you do work with someone, as long as you say, okay, there's like a work fit, this person has done like good work. I like this work. I want to do this work. I've already done this work. So there is a fit. There are still things that you need to look out for. Sure, that is much better than randomly applying to, let's say, Stanford, MIT, whatever, and then trying to find someone where there is no work fit. But and again, these are not just theoretical points that I'm making. Unfortunately, I have like a decent, I know a decent number of people who have experienced this in all these schools, where they get into these schools because they were the best of the best and they worked really hard at the undergrad level. They have great scores, great whatever. They've done 1 or 2 projects and they land into grad school and they have absolutely no idea, A, what kind of problems excite them. As a consequence, they don't know whom to work with. There is some matching process that they go through and they get matched with someone who remotely sort of align with their interests. They don't know about their working style. They don't know anything about who this person is. They're beginning to sort of they get started with that work, probably may not enjoy it because you haven't really spent time exploring that problem area. And as a consequence, you kind of feel stuck. You kind of feel like you're like, okay, I'm not doing things that I'm enjoying. No one is telling me, giving me like a nice problem to work on. So what do I do here? And unfortunately, I would say, I don't know, I don't have the right numbers for this, but I would like to believe that 1 in 5 or probably lesser or like more in 5, like more than 20%, somewhere between 20-30% of the students who get into even these so-called like very good programs, graduate schools, they all suffer. And they suffer because exactly of this reason. Not because they can't do research, not because they don't know how to read, none of that. It's simply because they don't know what to work on. They've never tried this area out. They don't know whom to work with. And as a consequence, they feel lost. Let that not happen to you. And it is the unfortunately and surprisingly, it is much more common than you believe it is. So you getting into like a big lab with like 100 students, you should just assume that you will get absolutely almost no time, probably once a month kind of a thing where you talk to your mentor for like an hour. So then the onus is on you to really like pick an agenda where you already know what you want to work on and you're like pushing and you're constantly working and you know what to do. But if you're slightly more on the side of, okay, you need to like need some, you think you need some mentorship, you're definitely independent, but you need some mentorship. Probably the second bucket is better, but there too, there are all these bells and whistles. There are all these little caveats saying, oh, what if my personality doesn't match with this person's personality? This person is like extremely like whatever. Like, there's no easy way to find out this information before you actually start working with someone. The true um, test of like a person's abilities usually comes to the surface when you start working with them, like work as in like serious work on some technical problem. And until then, yeah, you just don't know. They may sound super sweet on paper, but they may end up being someone else in reality. Likewise, they may sound like completely boring on paper, but they may be the most exciting, interesting person that you may end up working with. So there are no good ways to figure that out. The only way is, of course, all this is after you have these again, all this conversation is happening in the context of you having figured out like a ton of things, and then you're now trying to finalize on these some smaller, finer points of like whom to work with, how do I judge fitness, and so on. And there probably like a good way to do is either talk to them, have like extended conversations, ask them all your questions to which you it helps you gauge who this person is and how their personality, because it's a two-way test. Even the prof would likely, very likely, or your research manager would very likely be doing the same thing by asking you all these questions, trying to understand how is this person? Will I enjoy working with this person? Because think of this as like a relationship in some sense, where yeah, when you look for like a partner, it's not like it's not transactional. You want to find someone where whom you can actually enjoy speaking to and spending time with, and so on. Likewise, this kind of like a technical relationship is fairly intimate because it's like you kind of trying to come to the same page in terms of how you think, and that requires a number of years, or like at least requires a decent amount of time to get to know each other well enough. And some people hit it off, some don't. And the only way to figure those kinds of details out is by actually talking to people, talking to their lab members, talking to their students, and getting a sense of what the culture is in the lab, how fun they are, how introverted they are, how extroverted. All those discussions will likely happen if you ask the right questions. And if the PI is like running a tight ship, if the prof is running a tight ship, if the research manager is running a tight ship, then they will also be gauging you and like testing you likewise. So it's a two-way street. It works both ways, and it's good to learn these little bits of information. So that's some context. So let's get on with like our slides and like the content for today. I will want to definitely end this like much earlier than usual so that we can open the floor up for like discussions and like uh, present uh, and yeah, just make sure. All right. So I don't know whether do you see some part of the screen faded by any chance? Or is this all right? Uh, yes, faded. Oh, damn. Okay, what's going on? All right, some bug, UI bugs. All right, so let's start off now. Okay, thank you so much. So a couple of you did like submit your homeworks. So thank you, appreciate that. And let's start off just by quickly again going through some of these samples. Again, this is if you weren't around yesterday, this exercise is not to belittle you or like to make poke fun at your like limitations or whatever. And these are all nitpicking. These are all nuanced points that I'm going to raise, which hopefully just encourages you to think more, like push yourself into thinking clearly, sharper, making a much more tighter point than probably what you have attempted right now. So let it not reflect as like a shortcoming in you. Let it reflect as like this, take this as an opportunity just to use this as like sort of like a service free sort of like a peer review process where you're just getting like advice to give yourself that much better. All right. So this was one such response. I am so instead of getting your opinion, I'll quickly go through this because I want to cover like a certain bits of material and then uh, yeah, just end and like open it up for discussion. So I'm a student in CSE. I recently read your paper, blah blah blah, and found it quite engaging. Fair. In particular, the idea of using courses for real-time dimensionality has piqued my interest. Okay. Again, so you can probably drop these kinds of phrases. Has piqued my interest. Have you? It's very unlikely you would have used these phrases when speaking to someone. How would you rather say this? What's like one shorter, simpler way to express this idea? Would you use this in like spoken English? I would doubt it. I've used this in spoken English, but what's the more like obvious phrase that you would rather use? Feel free to like type it out in the chat if so. The idea is again just to keep things simple. I mean, like the simpler it is, and it must sound easy, but all these take like multiple iterations to like tune it right. So any suggestions on like how someone would rephrase this? No one? It shouldn't be. I mean, like just think of like what is it that is trying to be what is the person trying to convey that they found this idea uh, interesting. So just simply say, and the idea of using real-time dimensionality reduction was interesting. That's it. It's as simple as that. And okay. And in then what happens is now it seems like a switch and bait kind of like a trick where you say you start off with this paper, you found it quite engaging, and you don't even have to say and found it engaging, or what it's up to you. We can tighten that, and those are like nuances. And you're talking about this interesting idea of like using core sets for real-time dimensionality reduction. And then immediately it switches. Now the tracks have changed. And now you're telling me more about yourself, saying I've studied generative adversarial networks for physics simulations and have used tensors as tools for general relativity. I'm interested in gaining research experience. Why? Why did you stop short of like what you were about to tell me? Tell me more. Because it doesn't take a lot of effort to just like throw in this sentence, right? Anyone who reads the abstract, which is pretty much what you guys did, is can probably write this sentence down. But what would rather make for a like a much more engaging conversation is the idea of corsets. Yeah, I found this idea of corsets very interesting. I think I wanted to see if PCA did better than this. I think that was one of the questions that this person had raised in their questions. And these are all like specific topics. I know something about this topic. That's why I'm able to use these words with such fluency. But think of it as anything. You don't really care. I found I wondered if some XYZ, which is some other method, would be as good. And I ran these experiments and actually show that work. Run those experiments, do your homework. So this prototype loop that I kept referring to yesterday, you need to do your work first. There's no point writing these emails if you can't really, or like there may be some point to it, but you would rather want to like show in some concrete work and say that, okay, look, I mean business here. I'm very serious about what I'm talking about over here, rather than saying, oh, you know what, this is great, and this is what I have done, which if you read through it, it's not really the kind of topics, and I can speak because I am aware of this like area. Sure, I mean it's like broadly machine learning or whatever, but it's not really in the specific sort of kinds of tools that you would use to solve this problem or that has been explored in this paper. So that's the degree of specificity that I'm pushing you towards. It's not sufficient if you just say, oh, you know what, I've read this paper and I find this interesting, and then say, oh, but you know what, I've done something else in machine learning. It's great that you're telling you're describing some background about yourself, which is important. But that background will speak for itself as soon as you say, I tried X and Y, and I think like these are the results that I find. Would you agree? Would does anyone have any thoughts on this? Does anyone would anyone want to uh, probably contradict this or like have a different take on it? That's how I would think about it. Again, this is probably my opinion, but just evaluate for yourself what makes for a more compelling first sort of conversation, where you're not telling them these fluffy things saying, oh, I'm interested in this and that, but rather saying, I'm interested in this, I read this, and I tried this out, and this is what I see. What are your thoughts? Or like, is this interesting? Right? So that's the level of like finesse and detail that I'm like urging you to sort of consider. And that happens through time in the sense that you need to really write this down, think about it, go iterate, and even before you get to the stage, hopefully you've like already worked on stuff. And please let me know if there's like an opening for a research assistant. Yeah, sure. This last paragraph looks great. Um, but what I would have wanted this middle paragraph to look like would probably be just talk about this work a little more. Over here, there's like a topic being introduced, and then you sidestep that, and then talk about something else, and then say, okay, now do me like a favor and like let me be an RA in your lab. And the only information that I gain from this is probably, yeah, you're aware of this paper that I've written, which takes like 5 minutes to figure out if you go to my publications page. And you've read the abstract, so that's where you know core sets are being used, and you have some background in like machine learning. That's it. These are three pieces of information that I learned from you. And would you and you have a website, and if I have to, I'll look at it. But you've not really given me any piece like pieces of information to work with. This could have also been this email could have simply been, I have studied. You could have as well started over here, and it would have meant the same thing. It would have given me as much information about your skills, right? Because the first paragraph simply says you spent 5 minutes trying to figure out like what that paper is and what it uses. So think of this perspective of like what the other person is gaining just by reading my introductory email. What is it that they're learning about you which you want to tell them? Are you just happy just telling them that, yeah, I've tried out like one problem in machine learning, especially like generative network? They may not even be working on generative network. Machine learning is so broad. I don't work on generative networks, but I still call myself to be active in like machine learning, and I publish in like machine learning venues. But I don't work on generative networks. So it's like almost no use to me if someone says, oh, you know what, I want to work with you because I have experience in generative networks. Sure, you'll know the right tools and things to get started, but you've not thought about the problems that I'm interested in. And that makes it harder for me to relate to the kind of background that you have. So that's the perspective that I'm trying to drive. And that's the level of like finesse that you should also probably strive towards. Here's like another email. These were two submissions that came in yesterday. So thank you again to both of you. You folks are like, again, ahead of the curve in terms of like what your peers are getting out of this probably, because you're actually going ahead and like writing these things down, and like uh, you're consciously exercising that muscle of like getting better at this. I've gone through your paper and found it interesting. I have previously worked on Bayesian neural networks and infer the posterior by elbow using Monte Carlo. Again, it's the same symptom. It's exactly the same symptom that I described in the previous email. So Bayesian structural adaptation for continuous learning has little to do with, okay, probably has stuff to do, but it's like very weakly related to just doing like an elbow using Monte Carlo. Sure, it is good that you know this. I am glad that you know this and you're telling me that you know this, but it doesn't really connect to this stuff that you just read. Why have you told me that you've gone through my paper when whatever follows up doesn't really relate to this? So I know you've mentioned it here, which is great. You could probably just like drop this. Not required. You don't have to like justify your background for reading this. Even if you hadn't told me this, and if you had said you've read my paper, I'll take it at face value that you've read my paper, because what follows is important. And then you say you have used sparse binary matrices for structured learning. I think that using imposter semi-definite might give better accuracy due to the properties of unbiased estimators, which reduce the complexity of the algorithm. Great, great. This is fantastic. Now, this is the kind of stuff I would love. I mean, any professor, any researcher would love to read. It shows me that you've started thinking about this problem without me explicitly telling you. What would have been like a cherry on this cake is you actually having run this semi-definite matrices experiment baseline. and then said, I actually ran this idea, and unfortunately, I don't see any improvement, or I do see an improvement. If you see an improvement, that's a good result. But assuming this paper has been like published at like a decent venue, the peer review should have ensured that there are very strong baselines too. That's just how you do science. You say you want to come up with method X. First, you just tell how it does, how the other methods, existing methods that the literature is aware of, how that how they manage to solve your problem. So hopefully this baseline hasn't already been done in the paper and you've read it carefully enough. That all this shows me that you there is like a latent amount of work that you've put in, which I'm it's not visible just through words, and it need not be. But the fact that you have said that I've tried this, I've done this, these are the results, automatically gives me much, much more information than you can imagine. It tells me that, yeah, you know how to implement stuff, you know basics of machine learning, you know how to read papers, you know how to ask questions. These are all non-trivial skills. These are all like fairly sophisticated skills which require training and which requires like some amount of training to pick up. It's not that you can't do it or they can't do it or she can't do it. It's just that it takes some time. It takes some deliberation. It takes some conscious effort. And only then do you pick up these skills. So yeah, I would have loved this if oh sorry, I must have gone wrong with the formatting. If you could probably have added saying, I actually did try it and these are the results. It's interesting because X. Your hypothesis over here is it should do better because it's an unbiased estimator. But if it doesn't end up doing better experimentally, that's interesting, right? Either your initial assumption was wrong or there's something wrong in their implementation, one of these two. And then it's a game of chess. So obviously, when you tell this information, the professor on the other side or the PI on the other side will just ask you exactly this question. Will challenge you exactly on this particular narrative, right? Will then say, "Oh, are you sure you think the unbiased? It's because of this unbiased estimator that PSD matrices should do better." And then you should probably have thought through an answer for that. So that's how you push yourself. It's all like an introspective game. It's all like you don't need validation from anyone. Have that self confidence, ask things that you would have wanted to ask yourself, and then just go for it. And then when you have some decent results and you've gone through this rabbit hole of like asking a few questions, then just tell it to them saying, then I asked XXX, then I tried YYY. That just tells that, okay, you have a thinking mind, which is the evidence that they really want before they hire you or work with you. And it's not easy. None of this is easy. This is all hard work. No substitute for hard work that I've ever understood or like I can relate to. You may be the sharpest mind who gets these ideas in like a snap, but to actually go through this work and like systematically do stuff, it just takes hours. It takes time. So yeah, that's the perspective. So my only feedback over here is you could have probably just dropped this. It doesn't really add any information. You're providing details of your web page, and the fact that you can tell me this and like have some meaningful conversation about this automatically tells me that yeah, you know enough machine learning that I can talk to you about it. So you don't really have to divert my attention by adding these things. Get to the point like right away, saying you've read this paper. This is what I think about it. I don't care who you are, what you're doing, yada yada. You could have probably added a line before this. I know I mentioned this yesterday. Could have added a line just to add some context, saying I'm a undergrad at whatever. I'm a second year undergrad in CS. That's it. That's that. You don't have to mention your college name. All those are details. But the fact that I would highlight that is as soon as I read that, okay, you're a second year student, third year student who's writing to me with like as precise and pointed information as possible, I'll be so happy. I'll be like, okay, this person is really putting in the effort. Because this is the kind of conversation I would expect with like from a PhD student, to be honest. And the fact that you're demonstrating it is shows immense maturity. So think about this is the perspective that I want to convey. I mean, it's not that you want to impress them and you're doing all these like there's a checkbox and you're doing following this template to impress them, but rather you yourself will learn a tremendous amount just by going through this exercise of concretely doing stuff and pushing yourself. Yeah. So and Pranod also has like oh yeah yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful point that also Neil also mentioned, saying itna sab kuch कर लिया तो why do I even need to go do a PhD, right? I mean, I'm clearly my own, I've clearly figured it all out, and why do I need any training whatsoever? The reason you may need training is, in hindsight, from an expert standpoint, this question may not be an interesting question, and you will probably be guided to pick more interesting, challenging questions and move in a direction which actually gets to discovering some significant piece of information which the community may not know. And that's okay. You don't have to start off with any of those kinds of fancy questions. You have you the most tangible ways you start with these kind of questions. Very simple things that are in your grasp, things that you've already learned, things that you can relate to very tangibly and can exercise some of your skills that you've already learned in your courses. Start there. It's very simple. I mean, keep it simple. Don't have to do fancy like, oh, I'm trying to find out like what like some desired like result, how that applies. Nothing. We all learn PhDs in linear algebra. We all do this. We know what unbiased estimators are, and you're just trying it out in this application domain. And the reason is just this amount of minimal work gets you a stronger hold on the subject, on like the concreteness of like different topics in that subject. And that makes it so much more easier to have these conversations. And then your advisor will tell you, yeah, if they really want to advise you and mentor you, they'll probably get back saying, yeah, that's great that you have explored this. But here, I have an interesting problem for you. Why don't you spend time on this? And then we can talk about like details about this problem. This shouldn't be that hard. I can explain it to you in 2 minutes. But here's like another interesting problem. Go ahead and like work on it. Try spending time on it. And that's where, to tackle that problem, that new problem, you may probably find yourself needing the baggage that you picked up over here. And these are all higher order things that I'm talking about and imploring you to consider. And it's not that you won't be able to do any research or you won't like have like a good experience if you don't do this, but it just makes your life so much more, I would say, easier and like fruitful. You'll get more out of it. There's a reason why I think most of these classes, even in high school, I never understood it. I had like a few good teachers who would tell me, read up this lesson before you come to class. And very few would do it. I would try doing it. I would like not be very disciplined about it. And in hindsight, of course, it works. I mean, for you to actually think about like something before you come to class and use the class as like use the teacher then as like a sounding board to talk about like your understandings and misunderstanding, you'll just get more out of it. But unfortunately, nobody's going to handhold you and spoon feed you into doing all that. That's where we expect maturity at the undergrad level and the grad level, where these are the skills that is, it's kind of unwritten and you kind of need to pick it up. But nobody tells us these things. But the reality is we get more out of it through this process. So, all right, that's the gist of it. We are at the 50-minute mark, so I want to just chug along and like cover up 2, 3, 4 topics for the day, for the day, and then like chat about stuff. So I did notice some of your submissions on like which are the venues, top venues in that those areas that I listed out. These are not. So some of the things that you've listed are probably not. I'm not sure how whoever wrote this figured this out, and we can have like a one-on-one, write me an email or whatever. But yeah, I would recommend going through CS rankings and the kind of process that I described in yesterday's module. The video is up, and try to find out what these venues really are. So these, I wouldn't call them like the top venues for these areas. I had also inserted computer science education over there as one of the fields to go and look for, whereas CS rankings doesn't list computer education as one of the fields that it provides information on, which is where I wanted to test like how do you actually find this information out. I didn't find again like great information from those of you who did attempt on like the top fields. These are not. I mean, they may look like they are. I think education and research ISER. There's an ISER. Um, there is a conference called ISER, which is Computer Science Education and Research, which is decent. As mentioned in the chat, core rankings. So I'll update the web page as well. I'm not sure whether core I mentioned core over there. Hopefully I do. I don't know. But again, all these are loose proxies. They're all like some of them may be core ranking A and not A plus and whatever. And it's a whatever gray area. But it's a good thing to at least know where the most prolific researchers in that community are like publishing. So that gives you a sense of what kind of papers to find, where to find them, etc. And one of you, I think, had mistaken venues for like colleges or schools and had named the names of universities. So that's not what I meant by venues. So by venue, I mean like uh, oh, is it? Oh, there's one of these conferences. ISCA probably is all right. So yeah, could be. Yeah, computer architecture. ISCA is all right. Yeah, I don't know. I've heard of which is the other one. Damn it. I'm oh, ISCA is. Oh, okay. I'm sorry if it is. Uh, but which micro? There is a micro which is like pretty popular in the computer architecture circuit. Probably ISCA is. I'm not sure. So yeah, I again, I'm not sure whether yeah, International Conference on Geometric Modeling and Processing. I've never heard this. Maybe more uh, maybe popular. I'm not sure. Symposium on Computational Geometry. I know SIGGRAPH is. So yeah, so I would even if they do end up being like popular or like the best venues, I would I'm just giving out this general sort of method, which is like yeah, have some barometers of like looking at like multiple sources like core and which I'll link to the webpage after our session and the CS rankings and things to find out like which are these venues. And yeah, by venues I don't really mean like the places of like universities where work like this is happening, but rather like conferences or journals or like academic venues which in which work like this is published. Alrighty, moving on. So now, since we are on this module of considering next steps, so you want to consider next steps after having figured out that you probably like research, you've tried out like a small research internship, and you have some experience under your belt. You want to try out these possibilities, and there's always usually this debate of like a MS, you're doing like a master's versus PhD outside India, or like a master's outside India versus masters in India, and so on. And yeah, all the I sure I have like a few opinions on this, and we will share some information on this. But again, the caveat is, yeah, I would rather do my homework before coming to this juncture and like trying to decide on these things. All these things will likely be redundant if you really don't know what to work on. You land there, you'll end up being there. But if you haven't really figured out like a way to uh, like if you haven't figured out like what you want to work on, then you probably have like a bad experience. Uh, so MS outside India versus PhD, generally these master's programs, the way they are designed is they generally are, um, yeah, one quick thought, which in fact Neil brings up, which I think mentioned even in the corresponding page, when you're trying to find like these conferences, CS rankings, the nice thing is it actually gives you names of those people. You can click on those names, and usually, I mean, again, there are all nuances to all of this, but this is just to give you like a quick sense of okay, what are these two, three venues that I need to keep an eye out on for me to like go ahead and like read more papers from. Because as I mentioned, like 97, 98, 99% of the publishing venues out there are outright fraud. So there's no point you spending time reading up like a paper from one of these venues because there wouldn't have been any good peer review and so on. So your aim is to quickly find these two top three venues and try to look up literature from there. And one way is, of course, through finding core and like looking at venue rankings or like these conference rankings. And the other is look at who the most prolific people are. And that itself is like a task. But usually, yeah, go to some very good school. The chances are like people are publishing in like good places at those schools, and then work your way backwards and try to find what these venues are. But that doesn't mean like someone who's not in that college or university is not doing good work. It's just that yeah, you're using some weak proxies to find information, and once you find your information, you move on. All right, that was the note on that. So coming back to your MS versus PhD conundrum, usually, yeah, most of these master's programs are seen as professional degrees. Not all of them are, but most of them are. So you're coming to, let's say, Europe, US, wherever. And these professional degrees are they want to get you job ready in some sense. So you're doing more coursework, slightly more advanced coursework. You're spending time heavily on like projects and whatnot, and that will help you like figure out okay some area of expertise to narrow down on. And you're not necessarily going to be doing any research over there. So you will just probably be building stuff, doing projects, and using that to get slightly more technical and technically advanced jobs. So you could probably be hired by, let's say, in computer science, like to be a compiler designer. Whereas at the undergrad level, in very few programs, you actually learn how to comprehensively write out like a compiler and learn some nuances. But in a master's course, you could actually pick like two courses which are like focused on like compilers and systems and specialize in that. And that is good enough usually for people to hire you as like a compilers designer. So generally, yeah, think of these more as like like which help you feed into like get into the professional space, get a job essentially. And these are generally paid programs. So these masters like expect you to pay them, and the pay is somewhere. I mean, it could be anywhere like 30 lakhs a year to whatever, like that kind of range. Some have scholarships, some don't, and whatnot. It's the whole spectrum out there. But again, if you're doing all of this with the belief that yeah, you can get into one of these programs and then do research, uh, there's a very good chance that you don't end up doing research because you would just won't have the time. The courses will keep you busy enough. They'll make you work. You'll have like weekly assignments. You'll have like bi-weekly project updates, and you'll be doing 3 or 4 such courses. So it'll be a packed schedule. It's very unlikely you'll be able to find time and make out time for like research, but some people do. I know people who have. In fact, one of the she's a professor right now at CMU. I think she did like a slightly more masters, like a courses heavy masters course first, masters program first, and then decided that yeah, she's learned something and then switched over to like a PhD program. And today she's like a faculty at CMU in the School of Computer Science. So it's not unheard of. People do it. Again, it'll require a great deal of great determination from you and a single-minded focus that yeah, I want to gain more research. This is my sole agenda. I will manage my courses and I'll do research. A lot of people they'll find it overwhelming. Some people can pull it off. Whatever. I mean, that's for something for you to decide given your tastes and sensibilities. But the reality is, most of them are not designed for research. There are some in Canada which actually actively have like a thesis component to it, and there are a few in the US which have a thesis component to it. But most of them you should take by default. Your assumption should be that yeah, most likely we won't get to engage in research. So that's the trade-off between like a master's and like a PhD. In terms of like doing a master's to gain some research, it doesn't always work out. So you should be careful. You should look at more information about that master's program. And and the reason for having this debate in your mind is could be very legitimate. I mean, you could have done like one research project. You've now pretty much graduated from your undergrad, and you think you want to do more, and you just don't want to sit at home and do stuff. You would rather be in a more formal, structured setting and do this stuff. And one way is to actually be like a research assistant in some lab for like a longer period, like 6 months or 1 year. And the other way is to do a master's and to learn more about this process. That's the context usually where people who want to do research may consider this kind of an option. And yeah, I would just be cautious about it because not all master's programs, not all of them fuel into or like feed nicely into making sure that you get a good research experience. So that's the little caveat that I would like throw your way. This is like an interesting perspective, even if you're considering a PhD program, which we have been through in our course, these entire modules in different shapes and forms. But I like how Sri Ram Krishnamurthy, who's like a professor at Brown in computer science, who's like, yeah, he's like the prolific researcher in the area of programming languages and more generally in computer science. He has written this huge blog piece, which was one of the readings for today, which was the reading for today, in fact, which is this 500,000 US dollar or like, yeah, $500,000 perspective that you should probably know about, which goes on to like validating exactly the kinds of things that we have spoken so far. So when someone is reviewing your PhD application at like a competitive school, by a competitive school, I mean, let's say the top 30, 40, 50 schools in like a PhD program in, let's say, the US, which is fairly competitive to get into. The perspective that they would, a faculty who would be reviewing your application, the perspective that they would have is, look, I'm going to fund this student. The way funding works for like a PhD program is very different from like a master's program. So the master's program is you are paying, most likely you are paying for the master's course. So you're paying to get an education and they're giving you like professional education in advanced courses in computer science, and you're using that to get a job thereafter. In a PhD program, you're being paid to produce knowledge. You're paid to produce, do good science. And you don't have to pay a dime. Your tuition is generally waived off. And over and above, you get a stipend or a salary, which will ensure that your daily sort of costs and like your monthly average costs are sustained quite comfortably. And they're paying you the salary because they believe that you are an employee in some sense for in the scientific community, and you can produce scientific knowledge by yourself. And the question is, who's paying you then? Who is funding who's footing the bill? In the Indian context, most public universities, like let's say NIT or NIT or one of these public universities, public meaning government funded universities, the government picks the tab quite often, but even now that trend is slightly like going away. So previously, all the PhD students would be funded through the institute, and the institute picks up funds from wherever it does, and you get a stipend from the institute. That's not the case these days. You need to apply for fellowships yourself. So there's a PMRF kind of fellowship that we were discussing in module two, and so on. So you need to figure out some way to get your funds. In the US, in computer science especially, if you're going to join a PhD program, it is very likely, oh no, I mean, it's almost always guaranteed that you will be funded. And who's picking that tab is not the institute. It's not the, so if you're applying to University X, it's not the CS department of University X who's going to pay for that money or pay for that thing. Uh, but rather, it is the professor whom you would work with. They are going to be footing your bill. They are going to be paying for you, and they will figure out the funds from somewhere. They will write grants. They will do something. They'll figure out those funds, and they will sort of use that money to fund you to work with them. So think of this, and I mentioned this. This is like a conversation that we had in module two as well. Think of like a Google coming to campus and saying, "Yeah, I want everyone to write me an email or like write a letter, and whoever says they're most excited and most passionate, I'm going to pick them and like work with them or get them to work with us." That won't work, right? So Google will have its own, like, or Microsoft or whatever, by any of these companies, which are slightly stricter in their hiring process. They'll have their own sweet process where they'll put you through like 20 to 30 different like tests and assessments and this and that. And they'll ask you hundreds of questions. And then they'll say, okay, given the skills that they've demonstrated over these last 2, 3 days, I think, yeah, this person is going to be a good fit. So they've directly tested the skills that they think they need on their job. Although till today, none of my friends who work at these places have ever reversed a linked list and done all these things. That's a separate conversation. But clearly, that's a proxy. Likewise, a proxy for like a research professor to be hiring a research student in their lab is evidence for having done research. So if you already have publications, great, because that's a good proxy for like where you're published. Again, when I say publications, not in like these 97, 98% uh, sort of dark matter where you publish stuff and it's just like there's no peer review and whatnot, but publications in like good areas, like good venues. But if you don't have publications in those good venues, which is infeasible by the end of undergrad for most of us, then they look for other proxies saying, how much do you know about a problem? How authoritatively are you talking about a problem? And so on, which is exactly all the things that we've spoken about till now. That you having done your homework, you having known more about a problem and so on, and using that information to start a conversation. Because they're going to bet $500,000 on you. That's a significant amount of money. So if you don't end up like performing or like don't end up enjoying research or you don't like enjoy the area that they are working in, it's a bad investment for them. And who's going to cover up for that investment? It's lost time, lost money, and lost emotional effort. So this is what the professor really wants to avoid at every cost. And this is what they've tuned themselves over a number of years to sort of help spot and pick and identify. So that's why I'm going about this message, and all the messaging that we have done so far culminates in like naturally leading up to this $500,000 perspective. Put in your work, do your homework, find a problem that bothers you, at least like start some work so that you know what research really takes, so that you can convince someone that, yeah, you're worth, it doesn't mean that you're worthless. If you can't convince someone, that doesn't mean you're not worth 500,000. It just means that they have no signal to gauge anything in a realistic, tangible, time bound fashion. So and all that natural work that you do, your homework and your prototyping iterations, that will directly lead to answering this question conveniently without you putting in much more work. That is already so much work. But all that, the advantage of having done all that hard work is now you have like pretty much like a ready to point at resource, which is your web page, saying these are the 20 things that I've already tried. And this is why I know what I'm talking about. And this is the problem that I'm interested in. And it could be a very naive problem from the perspective of your mentor who wants to hire you. It could be a naive problem, but that's okay. That's fine. You may go into the PhD and like completely change your problem, change your field. Perfectly fine. All that is fine. But they want to see evidence of having done research by yourself. And that's the sort of same point that I'm trying to go. Okay, there's also like a discussion going on in the chat, which is whether like a master's is required. In US, most programs don't need a master's. I didn't have a master's before I came in. I just had like an undergrad degree. You get to earn a master's along the way. So they just hand out like a master's as like a formality, because most of these hire you for the PhD program. So MIT EECS, the computer science department, doesn't even have a master's program. So you can't apply to a master's program. You can only apply to a PhD program. And then on the way, they just give you a master's saying, okay, this is like a degree requirement for like a master's degree. And you have to write out like a small thesis and whatnot. So all those are like seen as formality. So no, most programs don't need a master's program. Probably somewhere in Europe, London, UK is probably you may need it, but you should look that up. Most of them do. Most of them are okay with you being an undergrad. But again, what is like terribly important is probably you knowing what you want to do. And it may not align. It may not align. The reality is this money problem that I mentioned, where is the advisor picking money from, may have interesting consequences. Sometimes they pick money from industry. Some industrial lab may be giving some money to a professor saying, yeah, I'm going to give you this $500,000 if you work on this problem, which is of relevance to us. And in those cases, the advisor may end up like shoving that responsibility onto the student, saying, yeah, I don't care what problem you want to solve, but I've picked up money from these guys, and this is the specific, or like this is the broad problem that they have in mind. So I want you to work on that problem. And you may not enjoy working on that problem. So it's good to know all these things when you apply, and don't worry about all these things when you're starting your journey. These are all details that you need to be considering at that stage where you actually you want to apply. So there are all these like nuances and caveats which I mentioned more on the webpage, but this is the reality. So having money doesn't mean you'll enjoy it, or okay, your professor willing to fund you doesn't mean you'll enjoy it. Not knowing something or not getting into exactly the kinds of problems that your prof wants to or like imagines working on doesn't mean you'll enjoy it. You may just switch your interest and like you may start enjoying it. I know someone who got in like one area of mechanical engineering, and during the PhD switched over to physics because the physics department worked more closely with that flavor of mechanical engineering that they were interested in semiconductors and so on. And they completely moved tracks, which is totally fine. All that is fine. Your PhD journey will be a discovery process. You learn, that's fine. But there has to be a desire to chase certain problems, and you need to hopefully come in with some baggage of having done some things and knowing broadly what these fields have to offer. And that will just make the journey that much more rewarding. You'll get more out of it. All right. Yeah, this is the same point. If you don't, what is the right way to get a person to appreciate that uh, you have that experience, or like you have that maturity to work with them so that the $500,000 is justified? Back to basics. This is the stuff that we have discussed over the last 2, 3 modules. Someone's asking, is a PhD necessary to be a researcher? No, it's not. It's not. That's the again. This is module one, module two that we want to drive home again. Not all jobs out there will require you to do a PhD. There may be good research jobs which may actually get you started even after undergrad. Such jobs may be hard to find probably in the Indian context. Probably some may not be that much harder in like some other international context. So it's a tricky question, and we provide more details in on the course page as well. But yeah, the gist of it is no. For you to do research, you don't have to have like a PhD. You can do research as like even like a research assistant in someone's lab, enjoy that experience, and then tell yourself, okay, now that I've enjoyed it, I don't want to like spend 4, 5 years further in like solving these kinds of problems. I don't want to do a PhD. Oh yeah, bas, theek. I did 1 or 2 research projects, and I actually spent after my undergrad, I spent 1 year doing like a RA-ship with like a professor in an area that I thought I'll enjoy. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it, I did enjoy it modestly, but not to the extent that I want to spend the next 4, 5 years. So that's okay. I'll now go ahead and do something else. I'll do like pick up like a job or like whatever. And that's fine as well. That is fine. But what the larger message is that there are all these ways for you to identify how to do research. And that's what we are imploring you to explore. Because most people are not just aware of these options. They're not aware that this is a way to think about things. And for them, research means PhD. And then there is this craze to apply to PhD programs, and as a consequence, you miss out on all these different perspectives that we have laid out. Yeah, what are the opportunities or options? Okay, I think most of the folks who are asking these questions probably have joined in today and not module two, which is where we actually discuss this stuff. But I'll touch upon them briefly. So I'll probably answer this in like I won't spend more than a minute, but I would strongly recommend like module two. I think is when we talk about. That page has like a bunch of information, but I'll briefly like go through some of that stuff now. So, what about like the Indian context? Doing like an MS research in India versus outside, and again, this is assuming you know whom you want to work with, etc. Uh, there are some pros and cons to each. The pros of doing it in India is it's relatively it's like very inexpensive. You don't really have to spend money pretty much at all, or like it's very modest. The barrier to entry is, in fact, because which is, I think, a failing of our system itself, where, or like call it whatever, we haven't really figured out a way to strengthen our undergrad research ecosystem. And as a consequence, the graduate programs all realize this fact, they all accept this fact that probably students coming in don't have undergrad research experience. So there's no way to evaluate them well enough on research. So instead, let's have like a standardized exam, which kind of like goes a layer deeper into the course material itself. So these are courses that you would have been exposed to in your undergrad. For computer science, it's like, yeah, discrete math and like theory of computation, compilers, automata, operating systems, and so on, databases, and so on. But they ask slightly non-trivial questions because they want you to understand that material well enough, and they think that is good enough proxy for you to start doing graduate level work. Unfortunately, the reality, again, if you look at the Indian Institute of Science, which is like a place where like high quality research happens in India, in computer science at least, and across many different engineering and sciences disciplines, the uh, the most popular course that students choose is an MTech and not a MS. So uh, the Indian Institute of Science, at least the Department of Computer Science, provides 2 courses. One is like a 2-year MTech program, which is coursework heavy, and you have to do like a small thesis component towards the end. So there is some research involved in it, but it may not be like extensive research because you get only to spend like 6 months probably on your thesis the last semester. And there's an MS by research kind of thing as well. They may call it something else, but essentially it's a more researchy program where you get to spend 3 years. So 2 years on your coursework, which everyone does, the MTech program does. and like 1 year for research, which is a good amount of time to actually get some good research in. Unfortunately, most students pick MTech because I think, again, this is by ranking. I don't know how it works too well, but this is my broad sense from whatever I've known over the last couple of years, that all the more like higher ranked students end up picking MTech and not MS by research because it's a 2 year thing, it's shorter, you immediately get into a job and like whatever, without even asking themselves whether this is what they want to do, without even giving research a good shot. They just don't know it because everyone is selecting, all the top ranked students are selecting MTech, so I should also select MTech, let's go for MTech. That's the unfortunate reality. That's how ill-informed we are. And that's one of the things that this course wants to address, that gap which the course wants to address. There is an MS by research option. It takes 3 years. It takes 3 years because everybody realizes that research is like slightly like a longer term game. Don't expect to do good research in like 2 months, 3 months. It just won't happen. So that's the reality because it seems more well defined. So that's why you'll think it's much easier and like you'll probably get more out of it. Uh, uh, yeah, that is true. That is also true. Uh, oh, I'm sorry. That's in some conversation. I took it in the context of like what we've been doing in this course. So yeah, yeah. Yeah, and of course you are close to your friends and family. You have a cultural advantage. You may probably be moving to another city and experiencing something new, but you're still close enough to your parents and your family and your loved ones. And that's an advantage which, of course, like international stuff doesn't allow. The international thing, on the other hand, has it's a different perspective where this, I think, probably is like a core advantage that and uh, education outside would probably provide in research, where these schools are big enough, these institutes and departments are big enough where they have multiple people within like an area, which is usually not the case in India. Unfortunately, we have a talent crunch. Not many people want to come back and serve as faculty. There's a faculty shortage, there's a quality faculty shortage, and these are all problems because the pipeline to produce good graduate students is not robust. And we believe that pipeline starts at the undergrad level, and that's why we are doing this course. But unfortunately, there's a leaky pipeline because of which all the talent that we're producing from our schools don't feed in, or at least some percentage of them don't naturally feed in as faculty. Very few retain or like come back. So a direct consequence of this is you may not find multiple people being experts in a given area. So even Indian Institute of Science, for that matter, which is considered to be like a prolific school or like a good research school. In computer science, unfortunately, we don't cover all areas. We probably just have like one faculty in databases, one faculty in computer security, one faculty in operating system, and so on. Whereas schools outside, we probably will have multiple such faculty, and that just gives you more dimensions to learn from. So that's a trade-off. And it doesn't mean that the faculty would in India are like bad or like it's a sub-quality, suboptimal kind of thing. Nothing. There's not a indication of like quality. Quality could still be top class, world class, and that is what these schools offer. But it's just that you don't have that that range that you would probably benefit from. The peer group and exposure, general exposure, probably may also be limited depending on the nature of these schools. There could just be the number of talks could be just more. Number of people coming in, like visiting and talking about their work, could just be more. Peer group will also be slightly different because assume these are all as motivated as you. They've all done their homework or done more homework than you to get to where they are. So this is definitely like a very focused research group. Whereas in like a master's over here, there may still be people just trying to figure out. They've just heard from someone that yeah, GATE is like a good exam to give, and if you write GATE and you get like into this prestigious whatever school, but that extra layer of homework has not probably been done of like finding out like a problem that you're interested in, finding out people that you know who would be interested in working on this kind of problem. That cycle may not have happened over here, and as a consequence they may seem slightly more like uh, detached from the program itself, and that's okay. People pick it up. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it takes some time. But yeah, you may find these kind of very subtle differences in qualities in your peer. And of course, there's always the thing of like you're in like a new place, so it's a new culture, a new experience, and whatnot. All right. Uh, yeah. So let's see. I have probably one or two slides, and I want to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes so that I can throw the floor open and we can chat about stuff, while also making sure that we've covered enough topics and topics that we want to cover. Now, this is again, we discussed this briefly. So many people want to optimize which university they want to apply to, be it like an Indian university or like a university outside. Even in the Indian context, if you're applying to like an Indian PhD program, do your homework. The same process applies. All these faculty, they've all been trained to do excellent world-class work. So they would appreciate if they work with like a grad student who has done their homework. But unfortunately, that's not the culture. So they just work with whoever is like the local best in the pool who's applying to them, which doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they're not super focused. They don't already know a couple of things which will make the conversation much more. You can ramp up the level of conversation that you're having with your student like right away. So even if you're applying, considering applying to like an Indian program, do the same kind of homework. Reach out to them, talk to them, speak to them about like these works. Have the same kind of conversation. Look at it from the same perspective. So reaching out doesn't mean you have to reach out only to US profs and only they expect this kind of like a conversation, or like Europe or wherever. It's the same process. What you're doing in turn is like skilling up yourself and making yourself more mature to tackle more significant problems. That said, there's this overemphasis on which university to apply on. Most emails that I get, they all say, "Oh, I want to get into MIT. I want to get into Stanford. This is why I want to do this." It's again like a very naive approach to this entire process. There's no point getting into any of these schools if you don't know what you want to do. I would much rather you take the time out, spend 6 months, figure out some broad problem that you want to work on, and then figure out who these people are. And if there are people, of course, at these schools, then go ahead and talk to them and apply. And even then, it'll be very challenging to get in because it's just like a challenging process, and there's a lot of randomness involved and whatnot. But please ask those questions. Please like do that homework cycle, prototype cycle, and get to know yourself better and get more skilled. And this is the general advice that I do give. Who you work with is like infinitely more important than like which school probably you're working in. So it's unfortunate if you get into a school where you don't find a good advisor fit, they're not supportive, they're not encouraging, they're completely uninterested in what you have to do. Probably you may not get like a great experience. It may not end up being a great experience. Sure, you'll have very smart friends and you'll have like a good peer group and a friend group, but you may not really enjoy the process because you'll just feel lost. You'll just feel like, this is such a boring process. Nobody's here to tell me what to do and like even just talk to me about work. So that's why you much rather work with someone who's probably equally or like 100 times more excited about that problem space than you are. And then they'll have like constant ideas and they'll tell you hundreds of things to do and work on and so on. And it's just a fun process. So in that, let me also give you perspective about my own life situation. Like the advisor that I work with, she's trained in machine learning, but not in neuroscience and not in programming languages, not in the areas that I knew I wanted to work on. But then in my case, I had already done a decent amount of homework. I knew broadly what I wanted to work on, and I kind of also knew the kinds of problems that I wanted to tackle. And she's a great like intellectual sparring partner for me, where if I have an idea, I bounce it off with them, and she comes back and like says, "Oh, you should probably think about this, and you should probably think about that," and she pushes me to like just expand my own horizon on like how to think about this problem, and that's what I greatly benefit, and that's why I love working with her. So she's not the world expert in like programming languages or neuroscience or like these areas that I'm specializing in and I'm learning from, but rather she's learning with me, and that's very exciting. So I go and tell her stuff that I've learned, and I tell her, okay, this is the problem that I'm interested in. These are the things that I know. These are the tools that I have. And then because she's a curious, like a patient and like a sharp listener, she'll ask me all the right questions. She's like, okay, you tell me this, but how about this? Somebody else must have worked on this, right? So do you know who that is? And they're like, oh, shit, you know what? Yeah, that's a good point. I should look this up. So those are the kinds of conversations that I have and I enjoy. But not everybody may enjoy that kind of like, I would call it like slightly hands off because She's not like working on like telling me, oh, read this paper and read that topic and do this and do that. That's not how I want to make you the best use of my research experience over here, because I've already been through that phase. And then now I want to exercise more sort of like, okay, what are the problems that I am interested in? I will come up with this stuff and I'll solve this stuff. And that's the process, that journey that I want to experience. So for that, it's great. The working relationship that I have is fantastic. That may not work for you. And it's a process for you to learn what works for you and what degree of mentorship that you expect. And this is not the same kind of style that she has with other people, other PhD students in mind. She's slightly more hands-on with like yeah, folks who are younger in that journey. So they also know how to modulate their styles, but you need to know what you want to get out of it. That is more important. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to convey over here. And this could be like a common thing saying, thanks for like I sat through this course, I learned all this information, but I'm already in my, let's say, eighth semester, final year of my undergrad. What do I do? Nobody told me all this. I'm just realizing all this now. What's my next step? So in that case, I would honestly recommend like one of these three things, which is like an MTech or like an MS by research kind of a program at and only the top universities in India. So do it, get a sense for the rigorous coursework, advanced coursework, do some research, do some thesis, and get a sense for how things work. And I know a lot of students who have gone through this process, who are like at like top PhD programs and like working on like cutting edge stuff, and who are faculty now at places at like all these places which do great work. So there's irrespective of which school you are from, irrespective of which undergrad program you're from. I didn't have like a great undergrad program which wasn't like research focused or research heavy or anything like that. And that's fine. But there still is a way, and all this again will require hard work and stuff. But sure, this is a way. This is one concrete way. Another concrete way is again like an MS program, and I emphasize on those programs which will fully fund you, because you then don't have that financial burden of like paying back loans, which will weigh on you and which won't let you like explore stuff freely. And that's my reason behind emphasizing which will fund you fully. There may not be many such programs. There may be few such programs. Figure it out. I'm not sure. There should be a fourth option here, which I think I failed to mention, or probably, yeah, which I think I missed out on mentioning. Uh, Working at like either like a cutting edge corporate research lab or an academic lab. Yeah, good question. Where can we find fully funded programs? There's a resources page, which is what is module 6. We have some information on it, but find out more information and like let us also know. We'll update this page. So this page is explicitly meant to like document these kinds of details. We know a few in Canada, but again, it's just one line that is mentioned over there. So if you do end up going through this process and finding out more, let us know. Write me an email, and we'll be happy to like update this webpage. But the third way to get some tangible experience is what we've discussed so far is either join like a corporate research lab, which is usually hard because in India, I think most corporate research labs at least expect like a master's. I'm not sure. I could be, don't quote me on this, don't, I could be wrong. Very few are for undergrad. I worked at a corporate research lab, which actually hired undergrads, but that was a startup and it was an outlier in that space. But you could also join one of these labs, or you could be like a work as a assistant, research assistant with some professor for like a 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 year program, or like a 2 year duration. And the journey is exactly the same. Don't forget any of the basics that we have covered in the previous modules 1 through 5, of like doing your homework, building something, finding an interest, and then writing to this professor or like this research manager in this lab saying, I think I've worked on these things. Are these the kinds of problems that you work on? If yes, can I spend some time with you? And these are the quick observations that I had on your work and so on. Just develop that dialogue and develop the conversation. So that's pretty much it, in fact. So that's I'm at the 33-minute mark, so slightly off given our record of like doing well on time these last couple of days. So hopefully, how I want to at least wrap like the parting message that I want to convey is hopefully through this course we have shed light on like two perspectives on like thinking about this research game in general. One perspective is probably the perspective that you already know so far without like any additional information. And the perspective is that there's a template to it, that your seniors apply to masters, your seniors apply to PhD programs. As a consequence, you need to apply to those programs, and you also want to try out that template path. And there is certainty in it because people have already done it. And not everyone who has done it has been successful in getting into these programs. So there's like a big hit or miss, kind of like a anecdotal knowledge on what works versus what doesn't. And the focus, the perspective more is on building this application which looks good when you send it across to these universities. And these applications should have like 2 or 3 projects and 4 or 5 letters and this and that and all these ingredients. And you're using it as a checkbox to like aggressively like learn and do these projects, and you're picking up projects which will optimize them looking good on your CV. So you don't want to do any project which won't lead to a publication. You don't want to do a project with someone who you think will not be able to write you a good letter. You don't want to do so. You're all. I mean, that entire process is being tuned, fine tuned, such that your application process looks nice. And this is the reality. This is what most of us will end up doing if we are not told any other way, because this is the trend. This is what everyone does, and this is what you will also likely end up doing. And this is not introspective. You may or may not end up learning things about yourself as to what topics you like, what you don't like, why you don't like something, what kind of flavors or problems you like, improving yourself on your communication, and so on and so forth. And this other perspective that we have hopefully introduced in this course is slightly more uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty involved in it. And I could see this sense of uncertainty come up even in the kinds of questions that you asked over the last 2, 3 days, which is like, what if I'm not good at this stuff? When do I know I have to stop? What if this loneliness just is too much for me? Or what if I'm not good at it? What if there are a lot of these what if questions that will come up, which is great. That's the sort of comfort zone that I'm trying to sort of push you to get out of, because you're still in your undergrad or in that early stage of your career where not much can horribly go wrong. Even if you don't end up enjoying these things, you still have multiple sort of options to fall back on. Because in the process of going through the journey, you will pick up some hard skills, and that's enough to signal to like a regular employer that you have the right skills to do like a regular job. By regular, I mean which is not research heavy. But the problem is this uncertainty comes with like the need for you to be patient, perseverant, put in like a lot of work, keep asking yourself whether what you're doing is right, whether you're in the right direction, and so on. And there's probably very little active guidance you'll likely get going down this path. And it's a more like a long game sort of process where it'll take you a year or a year and a half to just learn about what are the topics that you like and get some experience, hard experience in it, build a portfolio, build a website, put these things on your website, deliberate over it, talk to others about it, initiate some conversations with some professors who are working in that area. It all takes time. It takes like a year, 2 years, 2.5, 3 years. And it's fine. You don't have to start early. The earlier you start, of course, you do have an advantage, but it's not a make or break situation. But that's the thing. There's less certainty in this, in the sense that there's less direct information which you can just copy paste as a template from your seniors and like apply it to yourself. And that's what makes it harder. But my hypothesis, although I don't have enough data to back this up, is most likely if you end up going through this journey, the journey that we are sort of prescribing and like the perspective that we're putting out there, you will likely have like a much more pleasurable, enjoyable experience if you do end up trying out research in a much more serious setting, like a research job or a PhD or like a much more longer term commitment. Then you likely have like a much enjoyable sort of journey. You absolutely get more out of it. And that's not my own. I mean, it's very easy to be biased because sure, I probably went through somewhat of this kind of a journey rather than this kind of a journey. And it's easy for me to say, oh, because I did this, this is the bias, and as a consequence, you should do this. But I've seen many, and I've spoken to like met a good fair variance of like people with different kinds of backgrounds and whatnot. And the ones that I see who enjoy and like really are like driven and motivated and don't get tired by this whole PhD journey. And some people, you'll see this constant like uh, symptom that, oh, this PhD exhausted me mentally. I'm just too tired by this. I'm too tired of the. I don't want to like look at research anymore. I don't want to do research anymore. My best guess is the symptom. Those kind of symptoms again tie back to things that you end up doing things that you don't enjoy or haven't validated that you actually enjoy, and as a consequence, you may fall into that bucket. So all the people that I do see who like thoroughly are totally into it are all these people who have definitely tried stuff out even before they got to that program, be it like a research job or whatever, and they had like some flair for it, and they go for it. Yeah, it's a serious problem where we of course need to improve our numbers of the kind of talent pool that we are producing, and that's the point behind having this course. So the first step is to probably start off from like a school like IIT Gandhinagar, which has like a very nice structure already laid out at like the undergrad level. But that's not where this effort is hopefully going to end. And the aim is to get this message across to as many schools as possible and get it as part of their curriculum and get this mindset driven in so as to improve just the quality of supply that we are producing as engineers out of undergrad in terms of like perspective, mindset. Not may not be hard skills, but at least the mindset that we're producing. And of course, there's a parallel problem of having good mentors and having good trainers to train these students in the Indian context. But you can't solve all the problems. And that doesn't mean if that problem exists, this problem should not be dealt with. And it's not a linear function where like a linearized thing where I need to first solve the faculty problem and then I need to solve the student problem. I don't think that's the right approach. The right approach is work on both these problems parallelly. The faculty problem is a problem that people are much more aware of. There's much more awareness about it, and there's much more deliberate sort of efforts toward it. But I don't think we're doing enough to plug this other knowledge gap that we have right now, which is the whole point behind having this kind of a course. So with that, I'd like to. I'm at like we have 20 more minutes. With that, I'd like to formally like just stop with the content and really just open up the floor for any kinds of questions or discussions. Uh, Feel free to chat. Feel free to speak out. But yeah, I mean, yeah, happy to hear your own thoughts on like how this relates to wherever you thought you were in your journey and trying to figure out like whether research was good for you or not. But yeah, happy to hear your thoughts or uh, chat about anything related to this. So yeah, thank you for being the sort of first victims of this content. Hopefully, you all got something out of it. I thoroughly enjoyed like at least even organizing and putting our thoughts. And Neil and I have worked on it for a good a year now in trying to just organize these bits of information. And of course, we want to do more. We don't want to stop with this. And this course is not going to be the end of it. It's just the beginning of things. Yeah. So now, in case someone had like, yeah, there was a comment on whether this is like a reference to Robert Frost road not taken. Probably it is, but yeah, more simply, we just had two perspectives, and probably the perspective that we introduce may not be the perspective that everybody knows, and like maybe much harder. But yeah, that's definitely a path lesser taken than the other one for sure. So that's for something for you to consider.
Hello, sir.
Hi. Yeah.
Do MS is available in India?
Yeah, there are. Probably Neil may have like a much more updated answer because my just knowledge about this is slightly outdated, probably. But I do know there are like, I mean, at least MS by MS, I assume you mean like MS by research kind of programs. I think most IITs these days do offer like an MS by research kind of a program. I could be wrong, but I've definitely seen it in the Indian context as well, if that's the spirit of the question that you had in mind. And yeah, Neil, if you have more information on that.
Yeah, so I guess so. For example, IISc definitely has a MS by Research program, and they run a MTech program in parallel, which is more course oriented and less project oriented. But the MS by Research is more flexible in terms of timeline, and also a lot of people convert. And this is also the intention of the program, to give you a bit of a teaser of what a research experience is like. And indeed, the expectation is that perhaps you will consider converting, to some sort of a PhD, either at IISc itself or elsewhere. Um, I think most IITs, I mean, they do have MS programs, but I don't know if in computer science, usually MS is a reference to a degree in one of the basic sciences. But in computer science,
Oh,
we usually have a MTech.
I
And
see.
the MTechs are also, again, I think different people are experimenting with different models right now. But usually, MTech is by default supposed to have some sort of a research component to it. But I think there are also MTech tracks that are more job oriented and industry focused, and you learn a very specific set of skills aimed at being able to be relevant to a particular kind of job market. And typically, it's, as you would expect, either in emerging areas like IoT or crypto or whatever. So you really have thematic master's programs coming out all over the country. But the default MTech CS program in most IITs is what you would think of as a MS by Research. I think it's morally equivalent, but I'm not used to hearing like MS in the IIT context, but IISc does call it MS by Research. And yeah, the triple ITs, and in fact, even ICERs and NICERs is slowly looking at, I think they didn't have computer science because they were again meant to be basic science institutes, but certainly seen a few CS-ish appointments happening across these institutes. So maybe that's a signal that these guys will also probably start offering, especially in areas that have an overlap with basic sciences. Like, so for instance, econ and CS has a huge intersection, and a lot of these places have faculty who operate in that intersection. So we expect to see programs like that come up as well. But by and large, yeah, MTech programs, which are accessible through typically GATE, many places. I think IIT Gandhinagar has even waived off the GATE requirement, but there still is like a internal written exam and interview procedure. So yeah, it does require some preparations, not completely automatic, but these programs certainly exist and are fairly popular as well. To the best of my knowledge, IISc is like one place that runs both the programs in parallel. We are also exploring running like a more like bifurcating the coursework and the research tracks, but at the moment we have just one program and it's research focused. So yeah.
Because I'd heard of this phrase being used in IT Madras's context. I think they have like something specifically called MS by Research, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I've only loosely heard.
Yeah, it's completely possible. Like there are like,
Yeah,
I think hopefully there is very much a bit of an explosion of different programs and people trying different things as well. So for instance, IIT Madras also has a BS program, which used to be until last year a 3-year program, and now it's a
right.
program. And it's also unusual in that it is an online program with a lot of offline components, but it's fundamentally an online program. And it's a BS program in data science. And like I said, it was based on, I think, popular demand that it's now changed and has become a 4-year program with exit points at every year. So you can exit at the first year with a certification, second year with diploma, third year with BS, and fourth year with, I don't know what they call it if you do the full 4 years, but yeah, you have exit options at every stage pretty much. So yeah, it's completely possible that answers here are not comprehensive, but high level, definitely lots of master's level opportunities in India, if that's of interest to you. Yeah.
I also want to quickly address one of the questions that came up earlier in the chat, which was like the kinds of opportunities after a PhD. So again, we did cover this in module 2. The universe is wide open for you to try out whatever it is you want to do after your PhD. In your mind, you could definitely treat the PhD as like a learning experience and like a place where you creatively engage with research for like a period of 4-5 years, whatever. And after that, it pretty much, I mean, it gives you like a set of skills, which is like thinking about a problem, breaking down problem, communicating the problem, and so on. And these are generally kind of skills that translate to most areas of life. most professions, irrespective of what the profession is. So I know PhDs who have gone on to uh, do become like consultants at like all these managing consulting firms. I know PhDs who have become entrepreneurs who have started their own thing. It may not even be something that they may have worked on. It's not something super technical that they worked on during the PhD, which they used in their products or the stuff that they were started working on as entrepreneurs. I know PhDs who have gone on to become science communicators, which is like not many people know about this, but again, like just communicating science is such a big, important field in of itself that you need well qualified people who have been through the science journey, who can understand that universe, and who can speak well, and who can probably communicate well, and who can write well, and be the bridge between like the lay audience versus like a technically expert audience. So I know a lot of PhDs who have become like patent attorneys. Again, this is kind of like you're interfacing with people who are innovating, who may not have like a research background and who may not have the breadth and depth of like a topic, and you're a subject matter expert and you're like bridging that gap. PhDs also become politicians, one closer to home for me, but I know like a bunch of folks who try out like politics after like their PhD. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much it's like a blank canvas as to how you want to make use of your time after your PhD. And not everybody gets into academia. I mean, like in fact, the minority gets into academia after like a PhD. So think of PhD as a journey where you're like doing all these intellectual gymnastics in some sense, where you're having fun. And yeah, what you want to do as like a next career step after your PhD is totally up to you. It's in your hands. So hopefully that answers that question in brief. But yeah, I think we have some more concrete like points mentioned on the webpage, so you should go ahead and take a look at that as well.
I guess you could also Google for the phrase alt academic, and on Twitter, I think the hashtag is like ALTAC. There's a lot of interesting and unusual opportunities that people post and discuss that may not have occurred to you as something that you might be able to do well in after leveraging your academic experience. So, I mean, usually the target audience is people who've actually been in academia for a while and are looking to move on. But a lot of these opportunities are just as legitimately valid for people who are fresh out of a PhD. So I think there's like an entire wiki on alt academic careers, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's something worth checking out, I think. Okay, I think there's a comment about having like a regular cohort meeting, like I think monthly or something. I don't think we have any plans of like archiving the Discord. I think the server can stay, and discussions can and hopefully should continue beyond like this sort of intensive 1 week thing that we did. And yeah, it's very easy to sort of spin up like a voice meetup or whatever on Discord, and if there's enough interest, we're happy to do that. We do, I think, hope to run the course again. And in fact, hopefully package it up in a way that others can run it too in their respective institutions and so forth. So more news on that will be, I think up soon. But in the meantime, yeah, absolutely. I think we're happy to just be around carrying forward casual discussions. And if there is enough momentum, we can definitely do meetups as well. Yes, Nishant, I think we have communicated that to Shashank. So,
Sorry, go ahead. Did I miss any?
Oh, and I think there's a message in the chat asking you to visit ITGN. So
I visit ITGN. Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, that's my visit to India itself is like long pending, and there are lots of other like hassles which I'm trying to figure out. But yeah, will happen soon.
Yep, fingers crossed. And okay, Pranav has a question that's fairly specific about CSE's press and if they're good for publishing research in CS. Okay, off the top of my head, I mean, I think that's a reputed publishing house.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not really aware of this.
Yeah, I mean,
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, sir, ma'am. Like if we want to do MS in foreign, what are the ways and how we can do it with scholarship?
Right. So that's a tough question to navigate because I don't think we have like very clear information on what these universities are which actually support. So I think your first order of business is actually to find what these universities are and which of these universities are which actually provide some scholarship. But I know, like for instance, I know some in Canada which actually have like a it's like public universities like which fund your master's degrees, and they have like a research component. Um, it is fairly competitive, but I don't know how it really works for like international students. So there are like broad references that we have put out on the resources page on our webpage. But I would, I think there are like other resources that you can probably find from the little few resources that we have put out, which should help you answer this question much more concretely. But in general, yeah, there has to be some, there usually is like some requirement like do you have the names of those top universities? I mean, these are the like the top ones. Like I know, for instance, University of British Columbia, so UBC, U Toronto, U Toronto has like a whole chain, I think, of like different campuses. I know also, I forget these. I'm very bad with names. If you show me the name, probably I'll recognize it. But let me try to find. But yeah, I mean, there are not many like yeah, I know Simon Fraser in like in Canada has some such programs. So look at like Google probably top 5 schools in Canada, and then you should get your search started off from there. Uh, but there again, I mean, if you're going to do research, you might as well like put in some homework and actually find out who it is that is probably working over there. Again, these are fairly short time courses because I think you have 2 years and 6 months for like finishing up that kind of a course. So you essentially have 6 months for like a research in for your research stint, and there too, I think you'll benefit most if you already go in with some information. So don't think that it's Canada and it's being paid for and it's easier. Less of fewer people know about it, and as a result, can we just go try things out over there? The journey will exactly be the same. The kind of frustrations that you'll have will likely also be the same if you don't do that little bit of like homework and patchwork to start off with. So yeah, I mean, think of sure there are these opportunities. It's probably similar to the kinds of opportunities you would get in India, but let that let let that be something
Yeah, I
that you
guess
keep.
I don't know if the question was specifically, yeah, I mean, if it's outside India, I guess ETH and EPFL also have like yeah, master's programs with full support, I guess.
Yeah, but they're very weird. From the last I remember, their hiring is like super limited, and there's like some convoluted process to get through it, or like whatever. Again, I'm not an authority on it, and it's been a while
Yeah,
since
I'm
I've been
also
plugged
not,
into
yeah, I think the only reason I know about it is we have had students from
go there. Yeah,
our BTech students actually have admits there, and I think one of them probably converted to a PhD at the same place. And as far as I
I
know,
see.
they're funded programs. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, they're competitive, and I'm not suggesting that it's easy to get in, but
Yeah,
good to be aware of because a lot of the times
yep,
I think
yeah,
the places that people have on their radars are universities in the US. I think definitely keep in mind. I think some places in Germany also provide
yep,
funding. Exactly.
absolutely. I
But
think the whole of Europe is essentially the education is free. Most part, I mean, most part of EU, at least the education, the European Union countries, education is free. But getting in is
there's
it's a
also
it's
language, I think, like
there are some language requirements there. Even I'm not sure. I know some friends who have been there and done these things. I could probably help connect you to those folks. But yeah, it's a little bit of a task just to get a sense for what the requirements are in the first place. And as far as like EPFL, I know for a fact that the MS program probably is open only to IT students or something like that. So they have like all these kinds of strange filters. Uh, And I could be wrong, and hopefully they've changed things. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's the reality of things over there.
Yep.
I know. Oh, yeah, yeah. This reminds me. I know a friend, in fact, who applied for like an Erasmus Mundus, which is like a popular scholarship program in Europe, for doing some coursework in like communication theory or something like that. And they really didn't enjoy that entire process because there was like a big expectation mismatch between the kinds of coursework and the kind of rigor that was in that particular program versus the kind of like baggage that they had and they were going with, which also I think alludes to the same do your homework bit kind of bit that we talk about, saying completely work on stuff, don't like go in with like a completely like a naive notion that yeah, I've done these courses, I've done well in these courses, as a consequence I'll enjoy all these sort of advanced degrees and like these advanced programs.
Yeah, I think Nishant, you're right. These are extremely competitive programs. I think one of the reasons it may make sense to aspire to them is because then at least you get the prep in, whether you get in or not. So come se kam is bahane, you're like you kind of put in the work, and that is something that will not that will not go waste, because that's just building up your foundations in this. Nothing that's EPFL or ETH specific, unless you're catching up on a language requirement or something, but that you will only do after you have a confirmed offer, probably. So I think it's still okay to keep such places on your radar and kind of but of course at the same time, be realistic and temper things based on your current situation, for sure. I think that's what all of this discussion has kind of been about, to find that sort of balance. But yeah, I mean, also I think, masters or bridge programs in India are also a great place to be if you're just if you need that time to figure things out, basically. Say why not? But yeah, I mean, essentially, even one thing that if your financial situation does not comfortably allow for it, just doing like a paid master's program, just because of some notion of, which is often misguided, of just being in a so-called good place or whatever, is in my opinion usually not worth it. So just rather do so the question to ask yourself is, why are you thinking about doing a master's in the first place? I mean, is it to prepare for industry? Is it to figure out if research is the right thing for you, and so on? And in most cases, usually the answer is that you're going to have an option that's at least as good as, if not better, than doing like a super expensive master's program someplace in the US, for example, which is like a thing that's a very typical target in many cases. So yeah. So I guess in particular, if you're trying to figure out if you're trying to do a master's to buy yourself some time to figure out if research is sort of the right thing for you to do, and you just want to buy time to explore, I think there are less expensive ways of, doing that whole discovery ka process. You could be a freelance researcher. Even just taking some time off would be cheaper than taking a loan to do one of these programs. And of course, you might wonder, am I going to get the same amount of credibility? And I think for this, you just need to sort of have the right amount of confidence in yourself and approach the right mentors, work with the right people, and I think you can totally make it happen. And the other situation is, if you want to prepare yourself for industry, and then again you have to consider, is it like a research oriented industry job that you're trying to prepare yourself for, in which case you might want to seriously consider preparing for a PhD instead of a master's. And if it's a regular, let's say a developer sort of a position in the CS context, like that's the sort of thing that comes to mind, then consider that you may not even need a master's, or that a master's from, like, you may not necessarily need one of the hyped up master's degrees to make that happen. So there are like very, very few specialized situations that I can think of where that sort of a choice is actually sensible and justified. So please do rethink that. I mean, I'm generally not opinionated about almost anything, but this particular one, I always find hard to understand why folks would actually take out really expensive loans, or just spend put themselves through an, in my mind, undue financial burden just to make this particular degree happen. It doesn't it doesn't add up, at least in my mind. I'm happy to be educated, but I think I also hope that folks will consider other options while they're thinking through this.
Yes, ma'am, it's a valuable and information about that.
Sure.
Ma'am, whether there are any other exams like GATE?
For masters in CS, I think it's by and large it's GATE. But if you're open to doing masters in related fields like mathematics, for example, it's JAM. And I think there's also like a CSIR exam which makes you eligible for certain fellowships. So you can look for the CSIR NET JRF exams. I think those give you enhanced financial support through your master's or PhD, but usually GATE is the main one to target in the Indian context. So yeah, like Shashank is saying, there are also some institute specific exams. As far as I remember, the ones that are there for TIFR, IISc, ISc, ISc and ISI are usually for their PhD programs, but ISI I think actually has a master's program.
Yep.
In computer science
and statistics and math. Yeah, there are 3 master's programs, I think. Yeah.
Right. And I think, again, depending on you, I mean, I think that they're especially good at things like security and crypto and so on, but also other areas. So I think ISI definitely has a specialized entrance exam that they run as well. So, and again, if you're looking at any overlap with math, I think NBHM also runs a national level exam for math fellowships. So those are all worth looking at. And of course, there's JEST, which is the exam to get into IMSc CS, but that's again like an integrated PhD program where the master's comes for free. And I think there is an exit option with masters, but really I think the mindset you're going in to that one is for PhD. CMI, I'm not very sure, but that's another institute to watch out for. I think they run their own exam as well. Yeah. I think what we can do in due course is update the website with pointers to some of these opportunities. I think there are already a few that are in there, but I don't remember what was the latest status, but we can make sure that we point to. I think our emphasis was more on things like internship opportunities and stuff like that, but we'll also add pointers to interesting master's programs and exams to watch out for and such. Yeah, thanks, Shashank. So. All right, so I think we are just about like 2 hours from when we started. So unless there is anything that's pressing that somebody would like to bring up or discuss, this may be a good time to sort of wind this down. And we will be actually calling it a wrap for the entire course at this point. Like Shashank said, thanks so much for sticking it out with us. We really appreciate your being here all the way, and some of you have been with us through every session. If you're new here, especially if you joined today for the first time, then welcome. You can catch up with the remaining materials from the recordings, and this one's going to be on YouTube as well. So the links will be posted back to the website so you can go and catch up. And we will be continuously updating the materials to reflect your feedback and our evolving thought processes too. So if you have any thoughts, it's never a bad time to get them in. You can write to either of us, or you could post a message in the Discord, where I think for as long as we're on Discord, we'll keep getting notified, and we are happy to engage back. So we look forward to doing that. And yeah, thank you so much. But special thanks to Shashank for putting in this really massive effort into all of this really excellent material. And hopefully it helps us make those career choices just a little more wisely. So thanks, Shashank. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you. Awesome. It was like a great experience and opportunity. Full thanks to Neeldhara here, who really has been like a great partner in crime and making sure this actually goes off. This was like a germ of an idea when we started off talking about this a year ago, and I'm very pleased and like super happy that we actually managed to get this off, and this has been fully concretized. So this is in style of the course that the stuff that we probably prescribed in this course, saying it's okay to have an idea, but then getting it concretized and like pushing out something and prototyping it, and then learning something from it and then going back is in a sense what has been implemented over here as well. So it may be slightly rough around the edges, and some of the content maybe probably we still need to work on, but I think there's at least like a good first shot that we took at, and there's like been a decent amount of learning from this. So yeah, thank you everyone sincerely for like interacting. It's pretty much your questions and your interactions that make it like worthwhile and like make this all fun and interactive. So thank you again.
All right, so we're going to keep in touch over Discord and maybe even do a few informal voice chats on a regular basis as we go along until next time, and we'll let you know whenever that happens. Look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, and Shashank, hopefully we look forward to seeing you in person here as well on our beautiful camp. So yeah, all right, so take care everybody. Good night. That's it for now. Cheers.
See ya. Bye. Good night, everyone. Mr. Karthik, we can probably stop recording. Bye. See ya. All right. I think it's a wrap.
Yep, it is. Thanks, Shashank. Really appreciate you doing this. And yeah, I think we can take our conversation offline as well.
Sure.
Wanted to save the chat. You probably could.
Yeah, I did. I did. I did. Today.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Cheers then. So yeah,
See
we'll
ya.
get up and yeah, I think if there are any loose ends logistics, we can do that offline. But for now, you
Sure.
should get some rest and something warm to drink, I guess.
I will do. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Bye bye. Good night. Good night. Bye.
Yeah. Cheers.